Hello and welcome to this live stream edition of the podcast. Today I want to talk about what I talked about yesterday, which was the idea that there's a lot going on the planet. And some of it isn't good. The reason I'm laughing is not about the fact that it's not good, but because yesterday was I sort of case study in not quite mastering the tech, and some of that absolutely it seemed to work in rehearsals, but it didn't. So full responsibility there. The other part was a glitchy Wi-Fi for whatever reason, and the first part was I was showing a slide, an image, and I thought that the cursor was visible, and it was pointed out to me that it wasn't. And thank you so much to that very kind individual, who I believe is also a subscriber as well as a viewer. So thank you. And I thought, did I get it to work? Was that explanation remotely good enough without really being able to highlight what I was trying to say visually? And I didn't think it was. And then I thought, well, mistakes and all, I'll keep them there as best I can, unless it interferes with the common thread or sense making in terms of the video. But it was so glitchy. I saw a couple of bits and I thought, that's not too bad. And then another bit and I thought, no, it's happened again. And then it happened again. And it happened again. And I thought, no, this is torturous viewing for anyone. So let's just bin that. And here we are again. So, as far as I'm aware, things are not glitching at the moment, at least. Hope you can hear and see okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what I was talking about yesterday, but I'll come at it from not exactly a different angle, but based on what I covered yesterday. I sort of went through it mentally and thought, let me pick out some salient points in terms of the message I'm trying to get across in terms of us helping ourselves, because it's really important that we keep on top of things these days. So to help us with that, what I've got are some slides just with certain headings on them, and effectively you'll see there that on that slide it says war with AI, disaster, corruption. I mean, I could go on and I could be very specific about a lot of things, but you yourself will know that if you look around right now, there's so much going on the planet. There are so many things which are worrying. And as I said yesterday, if we went back in time and we had the technology 100 years ago, 200, 2,000 years ago, then something like, when I say technology, some kind of wide web, if you can imagine that things wouldn't change historically, but we could still have Wi-Fi and X and whatever, then if we got those messages in from around the globe, there would be a lot of things happening, wouldn't there? The detail would be wrong, but there's always something happening. And I think the first thing to point out is what I'm getting at when I put up this headline is that the idea about things going on is to highlight that there are things going on. I mean, I'm not denying that for a second, but also to really get us to step back and think about that for a moment, because if there are things going on, and there always have been, but we are more and more aware of them in real time, it can seem overwhelming. And yes, absolutely, when certain things happen, depending on how close to home, either geographically or emotionally, we can become overwhelmed, and that's a natural thing. But I think we've got to be aware of that, because we can get ourselves into the habit at looking at issue after disaster, after conflict, after problem, after strife, after crisis, after whatever it may be. And that can cause us to shift our perspective, to think that everything out there is a disaster. Everything is a mess. And of course, at times I look at the world and think, yes, it is. But I forget that there's a lot that isn't a mess. There's a lot of kindness out there. Sometimes it's hard to find, but there is. There are a lot of people doing good. There are a lot of corporations who are pretty ethical. There are even some leaders who are quite ethical as well. There are areas on the planet where people are living peaceful and idyllic lives. And I think one of the reasons that things can seem so overwhelming is, as I say, because there are a lot of horrible things going on, but it is exaggerated. And I don't mean the horror of things is exaggerated. I mean how much out there is going on that is bad is exaggerated by social media and by, the mainstream news and media as well. And to explain what I mean, let's go here. We are wired to respond to threat, and corporations know that. So if you imagine that, well, let's take a step back and follow the money. So if we have to follow the money, then who would benefit from our attention? People would benefit from our attention if they somehow, with us looking at things, earn money. So of course, you know where I'm going with this. The more our eyeballs are on screens, and let's say on a social media platform, and those platforms are somehow connected to advertising revenue. So if the adverts pop up, then those platforms get paid. They get paid by the people who want to advertise. Then the more of us who are looking at whatever platform or stream or feed or set of videos it is, then the better. So they want to capture our attention. And we're also wired for threat. As I said yesterday, if we're walking through a forest or a jungle and we hear the snap of a twig, what do we generally do? We generally jump and look or turn or freeze and go quiet, because this could be a predator. It could be something or someone who wants to harm us. Broadly speaking, that's a good response. That's a good response to have, because it could be. And so when we hear that thing, our immediate, for many of us at least, reflex is to go, quiet, still, hold on. This could be someone, something that wants to harm me, us, this family, this tribe. We generally, unless we've become very used to the sounds of that particular area, which we can also, of course, but we'll generally not think, oh, it's nothing. Because if we kept on saying it's nothing, then we become breakfast for someone. So over millennia, we're not alone. Many animals are like this, of course. We are cautious. We are watching and scanning the environment for threat. And we need to pay attention when something looks like it might be threatening. We need to pay attention when something looks like it could cause us harm or cause someone or some group harm that we care about. So if you notice, a lot of the headlines, not all of them, but a lot of the headlines will be it's either salacious gossip, which of course triggers a different neurological response. Oh, right, who's spending time with who? Because this is the tribal thing. This could be connected to relationships, and that might shift the balance in the bigger tribe. So it's that, and not only, it's that a lot of the time, but also, of course, the negative headlines. This disaster happened. this crash over there, this conflict over there. And it's not that those do not warrant our attention. I don't mean to imply that at all. Of course they warrant our attention. And very often they warrant our empathy and sympathy and care and ability to help. But remember, we didn't really have access until, well, when radio, TV, probably. I mean, newspapers, they did whiz around quite quickly, but we didn't have access like we have access now in terms of the internet just a few years ago. So we have this ability 24/7 to be bombarded, engulfed in messages, information, and a lot of it is about things that are going wrong. And a lot of it is salacious stuff and generally trivia and nonsense, which we can get addicted to consuming. And that's probably doing us no real good if we do it for too long. But it's the threat stuff, if you consider, that maybe could cause us, if we're not careful, to think that, you know, what's that movie, Everything, Everywhere, All the Time, or, you know, words to that effect, probably mangle the title, but hopefully you get the gist, so that we begin to presume that all of this is happening all the time, always. And that can cause us to become hyper vigilant. It can cause us to give up almost, to just get in a sort of fetal position, or huddle everybody around and say, oh, look at the state of the place. And it is in some people's interests, as I've suggested, that we get focused over here and here's the latest crisis there, and this is the next thing that's gone wrong, and there's a problem here, there's a problem right on the doorstep, and there's one over that way. And if we keep on doing that, then we can begin to believe that literally everything is a mess. Everything is a threat. And our perception, our ability to perceive, is warped and shifted. And so it is in the interests of many, let's call them outlets, that we're fed information that is a little bit clickbait. It's a little bit, you need to click on this. You know, you must read this. This is a disaster for. Watch this video. I've never said anything so important before. Your freedom is at stake, and sometimes maybe it is, but you get the point. Those headlines, those thumbnails, those things that need to grab our attention. And when it's done cynically, and when it's done constantly and persistently, and it's one thing after another, then I think that is unethical. Because where's the good stuff? Where's the helpful stuff? Where's the educational stuff? And we can also be our own worst enemies, in the sense that we then begin to look for it. We begin to filter for those threats. We get into habits about, if I go and look at this person, they'll tell me about the bad stuff, and I need to know it. Do you, though? Do I? Do we? That is debatable. Some of it, yes, but a lot of it, I would suggest, probably not. So if we then go here, consider that our attention spans are shrinking. Now, I've made a couple of videos about this over the last year or two, and some people suggest it is to do with social media. It is to do with us going online and reading things. It is to do with us falling into the trap of the so-called clickbait. Because videos can be slickly produced, information, even if it is reasonable information, can be heavily graphics laden. Not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes there's more style than substance. Sometimes what happens is we're not really thinking. And I would suggest that with our attention spans shrinking, some people say it isn't only that, but I think a lot of it is to do with social media. It is to do with media generally. It is to do with the fact that we can pick up a device in the palm of our hand and have access to the world's information. And as I said yesterday, it's that old adage or metaphor. It's a little bit like trying to drink from a broken fire hydrant. The hydrant is broken and the water's coming out at about 100 miles an hour, and we're trying to drink from that. So that's going to be uncomfortable. We're overwhelmed. We'd step away. But we can sort of do that with information, because we have the ability to tap into it. So one of the things I would say up front in terms of looking after ourselves is to limit that time. And again, a study suggested that ideally for most people, the optimum amount of time that we should spend on social media is 30 minutes a day, 30 a day. And that's over all the platforms. So in other words, it's not 30 minutes on one, 30 minutes on another. It's if you're on 3 social media platforms, 30 minutes for the whole lot. Now, of course, that's one study and it's an average and everyone's different. And some people are perfectly happy and healthy and fulfilled and they spend longer on social media than that. Now, each of us being different can also generally recognize when we're just doom scrolling, as some people call it, when we're just doing something for the heck of it. And that also dumbs us down, because not only are our attention spans thinking, which means it's harder for us. We can change this around with a bit of practice, but it's harder for us, or can be harder for us, to actually focus on something, to learn something at a deeper level, to really get to grips what a problem is. We just want the top line. We want the headline. We want the salacious headline at times. We want the scary headline. We dig down. We take whatever's been written at face value, then we move on because we've got to read something else. So the ability to be still and think more deeply is diminishing. And as I say, I think this is a lot to do with the devices that allow access to that 24/7 stream of information, and I think it's partly to do with social media, but it's just media generally. Everything is becoming so slick, so well packaged, but like I say, very often style over substance. Not always, but a lot of the time. So what have we got so far? We've got the fact that the world is scary right now. There are good things in it, but we've also got the fact that we can access 24/7 all the time, more and more and more news, and a lot of the time the headlines are rigged so that it's the scary stuff and all the salacious stuff, the so-called clickbait, because we're wired to respond to threats. So anything that we think that might be threatening, or of course salacious, that's another neural pathway, then we'll jump on that and we'll gravitate towards it and we'll explore and we'll read and we'll find out a little bit more, but only for so long till the next headline comes up. And hopefully you can see that this doesn't put us in a very good position. It's not really how humans evolved. It's not how people evolved. We did not evolve to be in a world like that. And so this can be in of itself a stress. And then I'm going to say this, AI is dumbing us down. Video that I made a couple of days ago or so talking about this. And some people suggest that, yep, it is. Now, the study that I referred to was one that was talking about essay writing. And essentially, people who used, in this case, ChatGPT to help them write an essay 3 different essays, when they had to go and write on their own without that help, it was harder for them. And they found that when they did some brain scans in terms of connectivity and also self-referencing questionnaires, just talking to the people in this little study, that it would seem that their ability to engage with material, to be attentive when they were using AI, in this case a large language model, ChatGPT, it was much less than a group who were given no AI and had to write the essays on their own. And when they wrote them on their own and then used ChatGPT, it was quite useful because they knew the questions to ask. The moral of that tale in that video was that if we're going to use this stuff, we need to learn ourselves in the first instance. We need to go in and not be spreading our attention and not be jumping about as much from subject to subject. We all do to a degree, of course, but to sit calmly, stilly, consider, cogitate, ruminate, digest, ponder, go for a walk, come back again, do the same, write some notes down, take more notes, consider what it means to us, and then maybe use these AI things if you're that way inclined, because we're in great danger of just knowing everything at a surface level. It's that idea about, do you know it, or do you just Google know it? Before AI came in. So if we know it, we've probably thought about it. We might even have taught it. Try teaching something that you think you know about, and you'll find out if you know about it or not, or you'll find out at least where the gaps are. And some people can quote some stuff, but you just get it from Google. Not in of itself a bad thing. But we also need to have things that we know in a little bit of depth, in my opinion. And so when we Google stuff, we kind of know where the paper was or the article was, and we maybe know a few of the sort of top lines, but we don't really know it. And I think the same thing is going to happen if we're not careful with AI and these chatbots, because they're so seductive, they're so wonderful, they're there to help. And I just think there's a real danger in many different ways. But for the moment, I'll stick to the fact that our attention spans are getting shorter, partly because we're bouncing about from subject to subject. The subject we're bouncing around to can, of course, be the scary stuff because we're attracted to threat. Also, I believe we're in a great danger of not engaging with material properly, not thinking critically, ultimately, because we're just surface skimming, aided by these AI systems. It's not that they can't have their uses, but in my opinion, we have got to be very circumspect about how we engage with them. So we've got all that going on. And then, as alluded to earlier, we may become hypervigilant. We may become people who are looking around all the time, ready to jump at our own shadow, because we've not held our own attention long enough, which can make us anxious just because we're jumping around from subject to subject. Not everyone will be anxious because of that, but quite a few people will. And then we've got all this stuff coming in about all the things that are happening on the planet. And so what do we begin to see? This can become a bit of a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. We jump around so much, we don't think things through, we rely on Google at a surface level or AI, so there's no real depth to our thinking at all. We're simply taking the headline at face value. We're then seeing all these threats and the salacious stuff, which is normally dumbing us down anyway. I mean, who cares? But hey-ho. And these threats can then cause us to look for more threats, and it becomes its own echo chamber. And before we know it, we wake up one morning and all we're getting in the feed, or all we can think about, is salacious nonsense and threat, which can cause our system to then say, essentially, well, hold on a second. Threats are everywhere. We really need to pay close attention to this. For goodness sake, what is going on out there? Everything on the planet is wrong. And I would add, because of that, it can cause us to give away our power. It can cause us to say, what can I do about it anyway? It's all gone wrong, and I don't have to think too much because the AI thing does it. And I'll just go and sit in the corner and be a bit scared, because it's just everything everywhere all at once is frightening and scary and threatening and or salacious, which is again a heck of a way also to dumb us down. So I'll say again, hopefully you get the gist of what I'm saying. And I say all that not to be scary and not to sound, oh my gosh, it's all hopeless. Quite the reverse. I think that talking about this and mentioning that these things are out there, these potential threats to us in terms of our own psychological well-being, mentioning it is I believe, part of the, how would I put it, part of the way through the woods and out into the sunlight or into the sunny meadow, where it's better for us, potentially. The reason that awareness is so important is because we can't really do anything unless we're aware. We're just in that loop, in that echo chamber. But the minute we step back and say, hold on a second, this system, this is rigged, the game is rigged. there are a lot of people who want our time. They want our focus and they make money out of it. And there are other people who want us to be just wrong-footed quite a lot because a scary group and a scared population, well, they're easier to manage. But that's another story for another time. And also, when we then consider that we can become our own worst enemies because we have access to all the sweets in the sweet shop in the palm of our hand, everything that's out there, and of course chasing dopamine, the endless scroll or the doom scroll, we can find it very difficult to step away. Now, I believe that was set up badly. I believe that there should have been much more legislation put in place, particularly for children, in terms of access to social media and how social media and just being online on the internet is set up. And right now, I think we have the same situation. We're on the precipice of it with AI. And I believe we have to specifically look at children. But we also have to be aware that we cannot believe what we see. We can't believe what we're reading. And we should always get a second, third and fourth opinion, particularly one that wasn't AI. So when we are aware of all that, what can we do? Well, there are many things, and I'm only going to focus on one main thing, but I'll say a couple of things around that. So here we go. This is from yesterday to make my point. We've got to change our perspective. We've got to change our perspective. Now, let me move the cursor here, and let's see if it shows up. It does, I think, on my screen there. Yeah, there we go. There we go. But fear not. Even if you cannot see the cursor, I have dreamt up something. Talk about AI videos. This is far better than that. This is extraordinarily artistic, because what I wanted to show yesterday was that you will see there's a dog, there's another dog, and here's a person standing, man or a woman, probably with a hat on, maybe their hands in their pockets, long coat, possibly thick trousers and boots for the weather. And what I was saying yesterday is that is not a man or woman. That is not a human. And this isn't a person wearing a hat or a jacket with their hands in the pockets and boots and trousers. No. This is a dog. This is a photograph of 3 dogs. Now, it's been, I suspect, mucked around with, to put it in the vernacular, a little bit to ensure that we kind of see that effect, the effect that is the reason that this has been put together, which is to see a dog and a person. But this is not a person, it's another dog. There are 3 dogs in this photograph, and as far as I'm aware, no people. So here, now hold your breath, this is going to be fantastic. Here's my artistic rendition to, if you cannot see the dog, to help you see the dog. So here we go. There you are. Wow, I hear you say. So what I'm trying to show is that if you look at the photograph and imagine that this is the dog's head, eyes, nose, mouth. It is like a poodle type, a kind of curly-haired doggy. These are dog legs, not on a golf course, or perhaps the dogs are on a golf course, but that would make things quite confusing. So let's ignore that for the moment. So dog's legs, dog head, dog tail at the back. That's a dog's tail. You're looking towards the dog, and it is outsized compared to the other 2 dogs. Perhaps just the perspective of the photograph, or perhaps again a cut and paste type thing. So it's a dog. It's 3 dogs. Now I'll show you the original image again, and hopefully if you try and focus on where the dog's head is. There you go. Now maybe you'll be able to see it. Imagine that's its nose there, that white little point. So there's the dog. That's its tail. There's the legs of the dog. This dog is either really tiny and this one's in the distance, but they may well be sort of photoshopped in there. So Why am I saying that? I'm saying that, or showing you this, because if you imagine that when we're faced with threats, real or imagined, and when we're bombarded, and when the rest of our time is like junk that we're focused on, my word, not necessarily yours. So threats and junk and nonsense, and it is okay to just tune out and look at stuff that is trivial and interesting and as I say, salacious. Of course, people want to look at that stuff as well. And it is important to look at threats. But my point here is that when it becomes overpowering, when it becomes overwhelming, because we create it, and it's self-fulfilling because we get it fed back to us, particularly online. And also we get tuned into looking for more threats that are similar, then we can become, as I say, hyper-vigilant, which is jumping our own shadow very often and feeling threatened all the time. And that can mean that we give away our power, our personal power. We say to ourselves, there's nothing I can do. Poor little old me. It's so scary out there and there's so much going on and there's just nothing I can do. So I'll just hide away or I'll just sit here and be terrified. And the reason for showing you the two images is in part because I hadn't seen this particular little illusion before. But if you imagine that we might see strangers, baddies, bad people, when in actual fact it's a little fluffy poodle dog that I'm sure is calm, tame and nice and friendly. It's the same image. But if we get so threatened and our neural pathways are basically, the wiring is strengthened and broadened to be looking for threats, to spot more threats and only see the threats, then all we see is this scary stranger standing, looking up at us in the snow as we look out the window and wonder, why are they staring? What are they doing there? It's not a stranger, maybe a strange dog, but it's a little poodle, possibly photoshopped in to look even bigger than it is. It's tiny. So our perception shifts. We don't see the little fluffy dog. We see the strange, scary stranger. What might they be up to? And that perceptual shift can happen, particularly, of course, when, as I say, there are things going on the planet. There are threats out there. There are worries out there, but that's not the only thing. But if we just focus on that and we're jumping about, not really thinking critically about anything, skimming across the top, drinking from the fire hydrant and using some of these, in many ways, dangerous AI systems, then we can find ourselves not only hypervigilant, not only scared, but not actually getting any time to realize that we have more power than we actually understand, and we can do things to counter the imbalance that we may find ourselves in terms of our perception about the world. Because, like I say, I am not dismissing the fact there are things going on and some of those things are horrible. But I also think it's important to remind ourselves that there are good people, good things, there's hope, there's opportunity. So, you have a voice. Mentioned this already. You have a voice. We can look at, let's say, political situations, leaders, corporations polluting things. We can find ourselves also saying, there's nothing I can do about it. What's the point? Well, if we all say, what's the point, then nothing gets done. But if we realise that peacefully, legally, by whatever means that would be, we can say, hey, that's not acceptable. And you can turn the game around a little bit as well, because if all we're getting is bombarded with social media stuff, which is sometimes a lot of junk, sometimes misinformation, sometimes just there for us to click onto it and it's threatening and that's all we do, well, we can turn that back and say, well, we can use these platforms, we can communicate with other people, we can connect with like-minded individuals. It might not be in person, which is always best, but it can be online, face-to-face. And when we do that, what are we doing? Well, we're consolidating an opinion base. We're finding people who think the same way. And we're finding people who may be also, for example, let's just say it's about well-being. Let's say it's about what I'm talking about here. That if we got them together here online and we said, what are your strategies? What do you do day to day to keep well, to combat the fact that things can look a bit bleak from time to time? Then we also create a knowledge base that we share. So we all have a voice and we're all important, and no one is more important than anyone else. Some people have more influence, that's for sure, but nobody is above anybody else, in my opinion. So our voices count, and I think it's important to remember that. What else? Right, so this is where I did get to this yesterday, although this has been a little bit different today, and hopefully, as far as I can see, not as glitchy, not as glitchy. The famous last words. So the internal locus of control. So very, very briefly, there is the internal locus of control and the external locus of control. And it's a sort of, at first glance or hearing, it can sound a little bit odd. But basically what it means is this. If someone has an external locus of control, what they're essentially saying to themselves is that all the stuff goes on the planet, around the world, and there's nothing I can do about it. And an extreme version of that, they believe that all they can do is hunker down, and that events, time, other people, groups, the weather, it will just buffet them around. And they're just subject to that. They have no say in it. They have no sense of agency, of self-agency, of self-efficacy, of being able to go out there and impact their environment. One example would be to think that they had a voice. It might be to go out and plant some trees. It might be to go out and have a conversation with a neighbour. It might be to go for a run. I mean, literally, if the external locus of control is 100%, then you've got somebody who's in like deep trouble. For most of us, it's not 100%, but we can gravitate towards that. Well, there's no point. There's no point because I can't do this. I can't get fit. I can't join a club. I can't do whatever. And I appreciate that we all also have limitations in a concrete sense in our lives, maybe financially, maybe in that example, how many clubs there are around. But what I mean, of course, is that the mindset of there's nothing I can do. Everything just happens to me. I don't get a say in it. That's 100%. Pretty much external locus of control. And I think it's fair to say that we all have an element of that. I'm not saying we can control everything, but talking about control, well, the internal locus of control says, or the individual who's thinking along those lines, more predominantly internal than external, they are saying things like, I have a voice, I can make a difference, I can do that. I have a sense of self-efficacy, of self-agency. I can make an impact in my environment. I can go out and speak to people. I can join that club. I can make my voice heard about that situation. I can go and make an impact. I can write that thing and post it online. I can talk to this individual and persuade other people to do the same thing. In other words, it is a belief of self. And I think I'll say a belief, a precursor belief is you are worth it, to quote L'Oreal, wasn't it? That you're worth it. A lot of people, the self-worth is too low very often for them to even consider having an internal locus of control. So the belief for the internal locus of control is I can make a difference. And I believe the precursor, the sort of belief that will really help that belief of I can make a difference is I'm worth it. I'm important. I have something to say. I believe that I can add something to this conversation. I believe that I have some things that can be useful to other people, that can help them in society. So those types of belief that I am worth something, I'm as worthy a person as someone else over there. Again, be careful of putting people on pedestals. Once more, different specialized subject area for another time. And so with that sense of, it's not ego, it's not narcissism, because most people who aren't narcissists, thank goodness, a lot of people aren't. If they're not narcissists, the problem is the opposite. It's building up that sense of worth and self-esteem. So we've got to be careful of that. We've got to realize that we are worth it. We really are. And with that thought, then we can impact things. We can do things. And you may be thinking, isn't that connected to having confidence? Absolutely. And so we could go down that road, but very briefly, it would be probably exposure to things gradually that we were a little bit afraid of. It would be trying things out gradually, getting used to them that we were a little bit afraid of. A classic example would be, say, driving. A lot of people start off thinking, oh my gosh, how could I ever drive that car? They start taking driving lessons and they think, yeah, I was absolutely right. How can I ever drive this car? But eventually, through time and steps and tuition, etc., they get better at it. And I think in many ways that would summarize what I'm saying here. Gradually through time, if we are accessing things and getting overloaded and feeling threatened all the time and looking at junk online, then we can wean ourselves off it and do better things for ourselves. Get outside, walk in nature, whatever. And also, we can, through various steps, begin to do certain things that can make a difference, that we want to do to make a difference. Just a little thing, write a couple of lines and send the email, and next time send a full page. And so at the core of this little episode is this message about practicing those things that can help us create, in the first instance, if we need to, maybe enhance if we need to, but certainly build up the habit of, again, if we haven't been doing it, the internal locus of control. How do we do it? Really simple. We do the things that we can control. We do the things that are inside our orbit of control. Things that are outside of our control, pretty much the weather, for example, I might be concerned, and that has to be external. Nothing I can do about it, but I can build a shelter. So, you can't actually change that weather, but you could build a shelter, right? So that would be external and internal. External weather and external locus of control would be, it's going to rain, there's nothing I can do about it. But it's going to rain, but we could build that shelter. So things will happen that we don't control, can't control, but there are other things that right now we can, and sort of build up that muscle. And it also helps get us offline as much, and it helps us just jumping at our own, or helps us not to jump at our own shadows, is to do those things that we want to learn, or indeed we already have learned, but we can get back to. It's something we've forgotten to do regularly. It's something that we're not doing. And for example, and just make it up because everyone's different. It could be that we go back to gardening. Maybe you've got a little garden and you do some stuff in the garden. And so you get back to doing that. You have a project there. You can control that. It could be painting, maybe the house, maybe actually a landscape or whatever. You can control that. Do that. That can also get us into that state of flow. I've talked about that before. I won't muddy things up here by talking about it, but it's very beneficial. We're just focused on what we're doing, but building up, reminding ourselves about about the things that we can do, that we have control over, can not only help tip the balance because we're spending time doing that stuff and not on the other stuff, which if we spend too much time doing is bad for us. So we tip that balance and that's immediately better for us. But it reminds us that in our environment, there are a lot of things that we actually can control. Whether it's setting the alarm clock for a little bit earlier and going for a jog or going for a walk, we can control that. We can control that element of our well-being, that element of our fitness. And like I say, to go back to the example of the rain, yeah, we might set the alarm clock a bit earlier. We want to go for that walk or that jog, but it's raining outside. But we can control the clothes that we wear or even the route that we take. Maybe some of it is in a bit of woods and we get a bit of protection from the wind and the rain or whatever. Now, hopefully you get the point. And so I would say that rather than look out there, be buffeted around by people who want our attention, very often for the wrong reasons, and we get too addicted to the junk and too addicted to the fear, that we should remind ourselves that we're important and we're worth taking care of. We're worth taking care of ourselves. Our voices matter and we matter. And to help us disengage a little bit from some of the stuff that goes on out there that is just noise. And I'm segregating that from the stuff that, of course, we absolutely do need to pay attention to. Some of those threats, absolutely. But a lot of it, some of it at least, we don't. It's just noise. And so if we're focused on a daily basis doing things that further our well-being and therefore things that we can control, it builds up that feeling of being in control, that internal locus of control, and we feel less overpowered and beholden to all these random things that happen anyway. And a lot of them, at least, but not all, we literally can't control. Let's go back here then. It's very easy to get overwhelmed with all that's going on, says Nat. Thank you very much. I have to detach myself from it sometimes, otherwise I become obsessed with overthinking. Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't think we're alone. I think that's absolutely the case. And by the way, you'll be pleased to note, it happened yesterday as well. Thank goodness to tell me about the cursor, the missing cursor, that I found a way to switch the text on, the messages on, the chat on at long last. And the dog, I looked at that one. One of the reasons I was looking at, or using that photograph, I should say, is because I just saw it a couple of days ago online, and I thought, what am I not seeing here? I think there are a couple of different versions of it where one of the sort of images of the darker dog it's really darkened, so you can't really make out too much. And I think there's a lighter version where it's slightly easier to make out the contours of the dog. But for a while, and I'm normally not bad at those things, that was like, I thought I was quite good at these, but I didn't get that one at all. And then I thought, and somebody said, I could see in a comment, a dog, and I'm thinking, how's it a dog? And then eventually, of course, once you see it, you can begin to find it harder for it to look to you like a person. It then tends to look like a dog. So it is a good illusion. So that's what it was about. And very interesting about the internal locus of control. Well, thanks again, Nat. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Yes, it is, and it's something that I think about, not all the time, but from time to time. Very often, I find I'm reminded about it when I'm not actually practicing that, and I'm getting too caught up on external things, and I'm not taking enough me time. And me time can include, of course, meditation. It can include mindfulness. And as I said yesterday, when it was all about of a technical mess and probably a delivery mess as well. We've had some great weather, But how easy is it to not really be present and to think about the next thing that we want to do, or the issue that we have, or the problem that we have. And of course, some of the things that are really manufactured, in the sense that they're nothing to do with us, they're just clickbait. They're just things that people want us to look at. And so it can take us away from being present. And this summer, I mean, a lot of the days have been absolutely glorious. And come the winter, we'll probably look back and think, I didn't pay attention to the summer enough. I wasn't present enough. Hopefully not us. But I could see me slipping into it. And I thought, okay, you just need to focus a bit more on being present, and also put less attention out there and do the things that you can do, partly to flex the control muscle, and also partly because it's beneficial, or some of them can be. There's an overlap between flexing the control muscle, good in of itself, and also doing that flexing engaged in something that is also intrinsically good for us, like, going for a walk or going for a run. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. I think I've caught up with the messages. Really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. We'll begin to sign out. What I would say is that the ability to have some chat going is really useful, and thank goodness I've found a way to switch that box on. I had it working before, and then I was to change the setting. And also, if you've any questions and stuff about this, or comments you want to leave, please let me know. If you are watching this live, thanks a lot. Appreciate you sticking with it. If you are a subscriber and watching it live, thank you so much for subscribing and sticking with the channel. We're getting close to that magic number where I can unlock some different bits and pieces. If you're watching this live and not a subscriber, or watching the recording and not a subscriber, thank you very much for watching, and please consider subscribing. If you're a subscriber and watching the recording, again, thank you for subscribing. Subscriptions make a big difference on this platform, more so than I ever realized, different from other platforms. But anyway, I think we've got everything. I think we're up to date. So I guess it leaves me to say once more, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Bye for now.